In this video, we are going to solve challenging and complicated questions of Pythagorean Theorem. If you have not watched the first part of this chapter, I strongly suggest you to watch that first. I'm gonna put the link of that video in the description.
So Rab explains it all. Math, chem, physics never fall. Subscribe and learn. Ace every test. So Rab explains it best.
Let's start with the first example and see what do we have here. We have a rectangle. In a rectangle, and we have the length of that rectangle, it is 12 centimeters. I strongly suggest you to highlight the useful information that you can see in a question. And the width of that is equal to 9 centimeters. What does the question want? The question wants us to find the length of its diagonal. Okay, the first thing that I'm gonna do is drawing a rectangle. I'm gonna draw a figure for this question. This is my rectangle and I'm gonna write the length and width on this rectangle. 12 centimeters because lengths are equal to each other, and this is 9 centimeters and this one is 9 centimeters. What do we want to find? We want to find the diagonal. I'm gonna draw that. This is my diagonal. Okay, I'm gonna call it D. This is a missing value. And as you definitely know, in a rectangle, all the angles are equal to 90 degrees. So this one must be a 90-degree angle. Okay, I'm gonna highlight this triangle. Can you see that? I have a right triangle and I have a missing side. So the first thing that must come to my mind is what? Is Pythagorean Theorem. I'm gonna write the main formula. By the way, if you have watched the first part of this chapter, you know that these numbers are Pythagorean triples and you can easily find the value of D. But in case if you have not watched that, I'm gonna solve it here. So C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared. As you definitely know, C is the hypotenuse. Okay, here D is the hypotenuse, so I'm gonna replace that with D. So D squared is equal to, I'm gonna assume that A is equal to 9 centimeters, so 9 squared plus 12 to the power of 2. If I simplify that, I'm gonna have D squared is equal to 81, because 9 to the power of 2 is 81, and 12 squared would be 144, and if I add them, I'm gonna have 225. So the only thing that I need to do is taking a square root from both sides. So I'm gonna take a square root from this one and take a square root from this one. If I simplify that, I'm gonna have D, which is diagonal, is equal to 15. And as you definitely know, the negative answer cannot be taken as a length. So only positive answer is acceptable. So D, or diagonal, in this rectangle is equal to 15, and the unit of that is centimeters. Really easy. Look at the next example. We have the length of diagonals of a rhombus, and one of them is 6 centimeters, the other one is 8 centimeters. We want to calculate the perimeter of this rhombus. Really easy. So I'm gonna draw the diagonals. This is the first one and this is the shorter one. As you definitely know, in a rhombus, diagonals are perpendicular to each other. It means they form 90-degree angles, right? So all of these angles are equal to 90 degrees. And the second characteristics of rhombus that you must know is their diagonals divide each other into equal parts. What does it mean? I know that the longer diagonal is equal to 8 centimeters, right? But as I told you, in the point that they intersect, they divide each other into equal parts. So this part would be half of the length of the longer diagonal. So it would be 4 centimeters, and this part would be 3 centimeters. And I have a right triangle here. I'm gonna call it X. The only thing that I need to do is writing a Pythagorean theorem. I'm gonna write that here. I'm gonna skip the main formula because this is really easy. The hypotenuse is X, so X squared is equal to 4 squared. These are the legs, plus 3 squared. So if I simplify that, I'm gonna have X squared is equal to 16 plus 9. if I simplify that, add those values, I'm gonna have x squared is equal to 25. The only thing that I need to do is taking a square root from both sides. If I take that, I'm gonna have x is equal to 5 centimeters. This is a 25 is a perfect square, right? So, am I done with this question? No. What does the question want? The question wants us to find the perimeter. It means around the figure, right? And another characteristic of rhombus that you must know is all the sides are equal to each other. So for finding the perimeter of this rhombus, the only thing that I need to do is multiplying one side with 4. And what is the length of each side? As you can see, I just found that it is 5. So 4 times 5 would be 20 centimeters. This is the perimeter of this rhombus, really easy. Look at the next example. I have an isosceles trapezoid. As you can see in the figure, use the information to find its area. So the question wants me to find the area of this isosceles trapezoid. I have isosceles trapezoid. What is the formula of area? Area is equal to 1 over 2 times B1 plus B2. B1 is the first base, B2 is the second base, times height. Let's see, what do I have? Do I have B1? Yes, as you can see, the first base is 12 centimeters. So I have this value. What about B2? Do I have it? Yes, as you can see, it is 20 centimeters. I'm gonna write it here. But I do not have the height, so I must find the value of the height. I'm gonna draw this height. And as you can see, height is perpendicular to the opposite side. And I'm gonna draw this height. Again, this is perpendicular. As you definitely know, we have isosceles trapezoid and it is shown on the figure. So these two sides are equal to each other. 5 centimeters and 5 centimeters. These two sides are congruent and the heights are equal to each other. It is obvious, it is clear, because those two bases are parallel and the height is showing the distance between two parallel lines and they must be equal to each other. So based on HL postulate, it means hypotenuse and one hypotenuse and one leg, those two right triangles are congruent. So I can easily realize that these two sides, this one and this one, must be equal to each other. It is really simple and clear. Pay attention here. I'm gonna call it A, B, E, and F. A, B, E, F is a rectangle, right? So this side, this part, must be 12 centimeters, really easy. And if I call this one X, this one must be equal to that one, right? Because I proved that these two triangles are congruent. So this one is X as well. So I can easily realize 2X plus 12 is equal to 20 centimeters. I'm gonna solve this equation based on inverse operation. So I'm gonna subtract this one by 12 and this one by 12. These two are gonna cancel each other out. And if I add them, what am I going to have? I'm gonna have 2x is equal to 8. I'm gonna divide both sides by 2. It's really easy. I expect you to know how to solve this equation. So finally, x would be equal to 4 centimeters. So this side is equal to 4 centimeters. Now here I have a right triangle. Am I right or not? I have a right triangle and I have one missing side. The first thing that must come to my mind is Pythagorean Theorem. I'm gonna call this one Y. Let me erase the board to make some space for myself. Okay, I'm gonna apply Pythagorean Theorem for this right triangle. 5 squared, because this is hypotenuse, is equal to y squared, the missing side, plus 4 squared. Really easy. 25 is equal to y to the power of 2 plus 16. I'm gonna solve this based on transposition method. I'm gonna move it to the other side by changing the sign. So let's flip the sides of the equation. Y squared is equal to 25 minus 16. So y squared would be 9, and I'm gonna take a square root from both sides. Really easy. So y would be 3. Am I done with this example? No. Does the question want the height of this isosceles trapezoid? No, it does not want the height. As you can see, it wants area. So I'm gonna return to the main formula that I wrote here. I'm gonna continue here. A would be equal to 1 over 2 inside the parentheses first base 12 plus 20 times height that I just found the value of that, it is 3. So if I add them, it would be 32. 32 divided by 2 would be 16, and 16 times 3 would be 48. And because here the values are based on centimeter, the area would be a square centimeters. 48 square centimeters. Really easy. Look at the next example here. As you can see here, I have two right triangles and I want to find the x. Okay, you may think to yourself it is really easy. Let's start writing Pythagorean theorem for this right triangle. But can you please pay attention? If I write Pythagorean theorem for this right triangle, I have two missing sides. One of them is x and the other one is this one. So I need the value of this one, right? So the only thing that I need to do is finding this value first. What should I do? I must start with this triangle. I'm going to show it with 1. So I'm going to start with the first triangle and I'm going to write the Pythagorean theorem. 5 squared plus y squared is equal to 13 squared. If I simplify that, I'm going to have 25 plus y squared is equal to 169. I'm going to subtract both sides by 25. These two are going to cancel each other out, and finally y squared would be equal to 144. I'm going to take a square root from both sides. Really easy. So what am I going to have? Y would be equal to 12 centimeters. Now I have the length of this side. Okay, now I'm going to move to the second triangle. In the second triangle, I'm going to write the Pythagorean theorem. 12 squared plus x squared is equal to 15 squared, right? So 12 squared would be 144 plus x squared is equal to 225. Inverse operation minus 144. I'm gonna do that exactly with the second side. These two are gonna cancel each other out, and finally let me write here x squared would be equal to what? 81. And the only thing that I need to do is taking a square root from both sides. If I do that, the value of x would be 9 and the unit of that is centimeter. Really easy. Look at the next example. Again, as you can see, I have two right triangles here, right? And I want to find the value of x and y. I must start from triangle that it has only one missing side. So I must start from first triangle because this is x is the only missing side. But if I want to start from the second triangle, it would be impossible. Why? Because I have two missing sides, x and y. So let's start with the first one. What do I have? 5 squared plus 10 squared is equal to x squared. Really easy. What am I going to have? 25 plus 100 is equal to x squared. So consequently, x squared would be equal to 125. And the only thing that I need to do is taking a square root from both sides. If I take a square root from both sides, x would be equal to a square root radical 125. Yes, I can simplify that. I can write that as 25 times 5. Then I can write it as 5 times a square root of 5. But it is not needed. I'm going to keep it like that. If I were your teacher, it was acceptable. But please make sure that your teacher is going to accept that. Ask him before the exam. So this one is radical 125. Let's go for the second square and find the value of y. Radical 125 squared plus 4 squared is equal to y squared. If I do that, I'm gonna have 125 plus 16 is equal to y squared. So y squared would be equal to 141. I'm gonna take a square root from both sides. What am I going to have? I'm gonna have y is equal to radical or a square root of 141 centimeter. It's really close to 12, but it is not exactly, because 141 is not a perfect square. So I have found the value of x and y, and I'm done with this example. Here, we have too many right triangles. And what does the question want? The question wants us to find the value of x. I'm going to call this right triangle 1. Can I start with 1? No, because I do not know the value of x and this side. Can I start with triangle 2? No. Why? Because I do not know the value of this one and this one. So, the only choice that I have is starting with triangle number 3. I'm going to call this side, for example, A. I'm going to call this one B. And I have the x. So let's start with the third triangle. 8 squared plus 6 squared is equal to a square hypotenuse to the power of 2. Here is A. So what am I going to have? I'm going to have 64 plus 36 is equal to A squared. So A squared is equal to 100. I'm going to take a square root from both sides. And finally, A would be 10 centimeters. So I have found the first hypotenuse. It is equal to 10 centimeters. Now I can move to the second right triangle. I'm going to write it here. Pay attention. A is hypotenuse for the second triangle as well. So I'm going to write 7 squared plus b squared is equal to 10 squared. So 7 would be 49 plus b squared is equal to 100 minus 49 minus 49. If I simplify that, I'm gonna have b squared is equal to 51. Let's take a square root from both sides. Really easy. So b would be radical 51, and I'm not gonna simplify that because 51 is not a perfect square, and this is centimeter. Let's write that here. So b would be equal to radical 51 centimeter. Okay, let's erase the board to make some space for myself. Finally, now I can go for the first triangle and find the value of x. Because I have this value, b is equal to radical 51, and this one is 6. I'm gonna write x squared, one of the legs, plus 6 squared is equal to radical 51 squared. So x squared plus 36 is equal to, if I raise radical 51 or a square root of 51 to the power of 2, these 2 would cancel this radical because the power and index are equal to each other. So it would be 51. I'm gonna move it to the other side. So x squared would be, I expect you to know how to calculate this simple equation. X squared would be what? It would be 15. I'm gonna take a square roots from both sides. And finally, x would be radical 15 centimeters. Really, really easy. Here you can find more examples, and I strongly suggest you to solve them at home. If you have any question or if you wanted to share your answer, please feel free and write it in the comment box. I will try to answer them as soon as it was possible for me. Thank you for watching this video.